Hair loss isn't as great a concern today as it was years ago. I remember in the 70s, a lot of guys walked around with hair down to their shoulders. You still see them around today. I call some of these guys frozen hippies because they're wearing the same hairstyles today that were common in the late 60s and early 70s, the hair down to the shoulders. Hey, but to each his own. I mean, if you can grow hair like that, more power to you. I never could. When my hair gets really long, it starts to look like an afro. I couldn't grow it anyway. But the point is, though, that years ago, in the 70s, as I said, when a guy started to lose his hair, if he'd see any strands of hair in the shower, he'd just absolutely freak out. I mean, it was they had this idea that women in interviews were always talking about how they love guys with long hair and stuff like that. So when a guy started to lose his hair, especially if he was in his 20s or 30s, it was just a source of great concern and psychological distress. And they do anything, and this is how hair transplant and wigs and all that. And of course, a lot of bodybuilders lose their hair because they use high dose steroids. In other words, what happened is the steroids, the ones that, for example, testosterone, it has a metabolite called dihydrotestosterone, DHT, and DHT is the main hormone responsible for what they call male pattern baldness, also known as androgenic alopecia. So what happens is if you take large doses of steroids, so whether it's anabolic steroids, a lot of the oral anabolic steroids, I should point out, are also based on a DHT structure. Some of these are the most popular oral anabolic steroids, Primobolan, some of the others. They're based on a DHT structure, which means they could cause hair loss. Now, you might say, well, how come, if that's true, why is it that not all bodybuilders lose their hair? Well, for the DHT to activate and the process of hair loss, you have to have the genetics for male pattern baldness. If you don't have the genetics, no matter how much testosterone or anabolic steroid you use, you're not going to lose any hair, or you're going to lose your hair at normal rates, I should say. Now, some of the bodybuilders that are concerned about that, they started using drugs that inhibit DHT, or more specifically, inhibit the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, which converts testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. Probably the most popular one is called finasteride, or under the trade name Propecia. There's a lot of controversy about that. I've written about it in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. There's something called the post-finasteride syndrome, where a lot of men who have used finasteride, they claim to have lost their sex drive, it's made them impotent, and so on. That's not going to be the focus of the interview. I'm sorry, not the focus of this video. However, as I said, I've written about this in Applied Metabolics, and I have new information about the effects of finasteride that's going to be in an upcoming issue of Applied Metabolics for anyone who's interested, including other methods, other techniques that might help with hair loss. But in this video, I want to talk about nutrition and hair loss. In other words, how do nutrients and dieting affect hair loss? Hair loss during weight loss is commonly caused by nutrient deficiencies, as well as other effects such as sudden and rapid weight loss that can have on your body. Sudden weight loss and restrictive diets have been known to link to a condition known as acute telogen effluvium, one of the most common causes of widespread hair loss on the scalp. Usually that's kind of a temporary condition. That's the good thing about it. Unlike male pattern baldness, where it's more or less permanent. As well as diffuse alopecia seen in niacin deficiency. Studies have also reported potential associations between nutritional deficiency and chronic telogen effluvium and androgenic alopecia. Hold on a second. I get my notes here. Hold on a second. Male pattern hair loss is common, with close to 50% of men affected by the pattern hair loss by age 50. Just a little comment here. I find it kind of humorous how things have evolved among humans in the sense that being bald is no longer the stigma that it was years ago. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are in their 20s that purposely shave their heads. Apparently a lot of women, not all, but a lot of women don't seem to care about men with bald heads. Some of them think that they're virile. And there is something to that because, as I said, a byproduct of testosterone is actually the cause of most male pattern baldness, but not voluntary baldness, where somebody actually shaves their head. And it seems like every other guy on the street or every other guy I see in the gym or whatever is now completely bald. This was a rarity years ago. I mean, the only people you'd see with bald heads were certain actors like Yul Brynner and Telly Savalas, and they happen to look great bald. But most actors, for example, Sean Connery, when he played James Bond Agent 007 License to Kill, he wore a wig. He was already bald by the time he did the first James Bond movie, which was called Dr. No. I believe it was around 1963 or so, 62 or 63. He was already had thinning hair. And of course, later on, Sean Connery went completely bald. A lot of actors, too great a list to list. Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, all these actors. Of course, Pernell Roberts on Bonanza was a bald man who wore a wig. So did Dan Block, who played Huss Cartwright. They were bald. They wore wigs. So, again, because back then it was considered somewhat of a stigma. But today, bald is beautiful. What can I say? You know what I mean? However, certain people, I kind of believe that, don't really look good bald. Certain men, I mean, baldness isn't a good look for a lot of men, but that's just my personal opinion. Many nutritional supplements are marketed as hair loss treatments. A search of the keywords hair loss in the vitamin and dietary supplement section of Amazon.com yield over 1,000 products geared at preventing hair loss. These are mostly nutrient combinations with alleged hair preventive effects on hair loss, which I'll discuss in depth in a couple of minutes. But I should also point out that oversupplementation, taken in too many of certain nutrients, can also paradoxically lead to hair loss. These include selenium, vitamin A, and vitamin E. All of these in excess have been linked to hair loss. Iron deficiency is the world's most common nutritional deficiency, and it's a well-known cause of hair loss. While the mechanism of action by which iron impacts hair growth is not known, hair follicle matrix cells are some of the most rapidly dividing cells in the body. As a matter of fact, when you undergo chemotherapy for cancer, two common side effects are loss of hair and gastrointestinal problems, because the chemotherapy targets the fastest growing cells in the body, which are usually tumor cells. However, other fast growing cells include hair cells in the follicles, and also the cells that line the gastrointestinal tract, which is why you get those side effects of hair loss and gastrointestinal problems. Also, sperm cells are kind of fast growing, also adversely affected. But anyway, it turns out that iron deficiency can contribute to hair loss via its role as a cofactor for an enzyme called ribonucleotide reductase, which is the rate-limiting enzyme for DNA synthesis. In addition, multiple genes have been identified in the human hair follicle, and some may be regulated by iron. In a mouse model, reversal of iron deficiency led to complete restoration of hair growth. That's, of course, a mouse. Doesn't necessarily happen in humans. People that are at higher risk for hair loss include vegans and vegetarians, because the requirement for dietary iron is considered to be 1.8 times higher than that for meat consumers. The reason for that is because most of the fruits and vegetables contain a form of iron called non-heme iron, which has a lower bioavailability than heme iron that's found in meat and fish. That's why their iron requirements are higher in vegans. A lack of the mineral zinc can also cause hair loss. Dietary risk factors include vegetarianism, as bioavailability of zinc is lower in vegetables than meat, just like iron. Additionally, vegetarians typically consume more legumes and whole grains, which contain substances called phytates that bind to zinc and inhibit the absorption. There's a lot of these anti-nutrients in foods, and most people have no idea about them. In an upcoming article in my Applied Metabolics, I'm going to describe these natural anti-nutrients that exist in food, and you should know about them because they can bind to many essential nutrients, and you can wind up being almost deficient in these nutrients if you eat a lot of these foods that contain anti-nutrients. This will only be in Applied Metabolics. A study of 312 patients with androgenic alopecia or male pattern baldness showed that all groups had statistically lower zinc concentrations as compared to 30 healthy controls. In patients with male pattern baldness and low serum zinc levels, supplementation has been shown to have therapeutic effects. Again, you have to be low in zinc. If you have normal zinc levels, taking a lot of zinc is not going to cause your hair to grow. It's only if you're deficient. A deficiency of the B-complex vitamin niacin can also cause hair loss. It's called pellagra. That's the deficiency disease. And again, you have to be deficient, completely deficient in niacin for that to happen. A deficiency of polyunsaturated essential fatty acids such as linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid, and alpha-linoleic acid, an omega-3 fatty acid, can cause hair loss. Hair changes include loss of scalp hair and eyebrows, as well as lightening of the hair. Unsaturated fatty acids may modulate androgen action by inhibition of 5-alpha reductase, similar to the drug finasteride. In other words, taking in these polyunsaturated fats actually inhibits the same enzyme that's finasteride that causes that produces DHT in the body, which causes genetic hair loss. So in other words, taking these polyunsaturated fats is a natural way. If you have the genes for male pattern baldness, ingesting enough polyunsaturated fatty acids is a good way to kind of short circuit the genetic pattern for male pattern baldness. A lot of people don't know that. Additionally, arachidonic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid, which also is pushed for as a supplement for bodybuilders because it's involved in the muscle protein synthesis process. Arachidonic acid may promote hair growth by enhancing follicle proliferation. The follicles are where the hair grows out of. In one patient with essential fatty acid deficiency, topical application of safflower oil, high in linoleic acid, resulted in growth of hair. I wouldn't recommend, I don't think that'll work for most people, but it did for one patient. The trace mineral selenium can cause hair loss if a deficiency exists. On the other hand, excess selenium can also cause hair loss. How much selenium you want to take? You don't want to take more than 200 micrograms a day, because any more than that can actually also interfere with thyroid hormone production also. Vitamin D, data from the animal study suggests that vitamin D plays a role in hair follicle cycling. In a study of mice treated to model vitamin D-dependent rickets, the resultant animals develop hair loss. In other words, when they're deficient in D, they develop hair loss. In vitro studies have shown an increase in vitamin D receptor expression in the outer root sheath of keratinocytes during the growing phases of the hair cycle. In other words, vitamin D is involved in hair growth. Vitamin A. Precise levels of retinoic acid, which is a chemical name for vitamin A, are needed for the optimal function of the hair follicle. However, again, too much vitamin A can cause hair loss. How much is too much? Taking in more than 25,000 units a day consistently for maybe a year, since vitamin A is stored in the liver, that could eventually lead to some hair loss. Vitamin E. A study of 21 volunteers who received tocotrienols. Now, let me explain. You hear of vitamin E. Vitamin E chemically is called tocopherol. But the tocopherol family consists of 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienols. And for maximum health, you really have to have all of them. The main form of vitamin E is called alpha tocopherol, but it doesn't do a lot of the things that, for example, tocotrienols do. Tocotrienols are involved, for example, tocotrienols are involved in the preservation and health of neurons in the brain, and they also work in the same way to lower cholesterol as statins do, by inhibiting an enzyme in the liver called HMGA reductase, I believe. I might be mispronouncing that one, but it's the rate-limiting enzyme for cholesterol production. It's inhibited naturally by tocotrienols, and unlike statins, they don't have any side effects. Anyway, this study of 20 volunteers who received 100 milligrams of mixed tocotrienols daily showed significant increase in hair number as compared to a placebo group. In other words, tocotrienols actually grew hair in this group of volunteers. However, I should also point out that excess vitamin E can interfere with thyroid hormone production, which can also cause hair loss. So, it's a kind of, narrow line you walk here with some of these nutrients. One of the more famous nutrients that supposedly promotes hair growth is called biotin. For years, they thought that you don't need to take in any biotin from food because most of it was made by the intestinal bacteria, now known as the intestinal microbiome. However, in recent years, it was realized that a lot of the biotin produced by the microbiome isn't available. So you do still have to get biotin in food. There was again, for years, there was stories that if you ate raw egg whites contain a protein called avidin, which binds to biotin, which could theoretically lead to a biotin deficiency. However, when this was tested, this was shown in isolated cell studies, but when they tested it in human volunteers, these guys were actually in prison. They gave them 28 raw eggs a day, and for something like 6 months, none of them developed a biotin deficiency. None. So it's something that's, this avidin thing is something on paper, but doesn't really happen. But what about biotin and hair growth? No clinical trials have shown efficacy in treating hair loss with biotin supplementation in the absence of a deficiency. If you're deficient in biotin, it can adversely affect hair growth. But in other words, giving extra biotin won't stimulate hair growth. Despite this, biotin is found in multiple supplements marketed to consumers for hair loss. This marketing approach may have been chosen as biotin has been shown to have positive effects in the treatment of brittle fingernails. It's very good for brittle fingernails. That's true. What about protein and amino acids? I mean, your hair is made of protein, particularly a protein called keratin. So wouldn't it make sense that you have to have a certain amount of protein to have healthy hair? Yes, it does. If you have a protein malnutrition, which is like a complete absence of sufficient protein, diseases such as kwashiorkor and marasmus that's seen in third world countries, this can result in hair changes, brittle hair, loss of hair, thinning of hair. One amino acid called L-cysteine is a primary constituent of keratin, the main protein found in hair and nails. In a study of 100 people with hair loss, researchers have observed histidine and leucine deficiencies. Those are two amino acids in large percentages of participants across several types of alopecia, including androgenic alopecia or male pattern baldness and telogen effluvium, two common causes of baldness. Antioxidants. Oxidative stress has been linked to hair loss. In vitro or isolated cell or test tube studies of dermal papilla cells from male pattern baldness patients have shown that oxidative stress may have an important role in the balding phenotype and development of male pattern baldness. In other words, excess oxidation can cause you to lose your hair also. Additionally, in a study of endogenous antioxidant enzymes and lipid peroxidation in the scalps of patients with androgenic alopecia, excessive free radical generation was shown to occur in the scalps of patients with male pattern baldness accompanied by high levels of antioxidant enzymes that were unable to protect against the reactive oxygen species of free radicals. Those are the things that cause the oxidation effect. They're unpaired electrons. I don't want to get into biochemistry here. What about crash dieting? What's one of the most common causes of hair loss? Crash dieting. Crash dieting can cause hair loss. Again, it's related to going on too low a calorie intake, too low a protein intake, which leads to not enough of certain nutrients needed for hair growth. So, because your hair needs adequate calories and nutrients to grow properly. So when your body doesn't receive it, you get side effects like hair loss. In a 2015 study of 180 women with diffuse hair loss, it was found that the most common causes of hair loss were iron deficiency and psychological stress. In 8 of the cases, crash diets were the cause. So that's about it for nutrients. Some of you might be more concerned with this than others. The guys watching this are already bald, probably don't have much interest. And I tell you guys should be happy that generally society now doesn't look at baldness as a stigma, because some of you guys aren't old enough to remember this, but some of you guys who are older, over age, let's say 50 or 55, you might remember back in the 70s when baldness was not considered desirable at all in men. But today it's no big deal. But for those of you who are concerned about preserving your hair, some of these, paying attention to your nutrition can go a long way towards keeping your hair. And by the way, if you do decide to resort to drugs, and you're worried about the side effects of finasteride, which, by the way, only happens, or Propecia, it only happens in I think it's 8 to 10% of men, and they think a lot of it has to do with an underproduction of neurosteroids in the brain. I discussed that in Applied Metabolics. I'm not going to get into it now, but it doesn't happen to all men. But if you're concerned about it, I would suggest getting. You'd have to get a special prescription for this. They have there's a topical solution of finasteride combined with minoxidil, which is another hair loss treatment, which supposedly minoxidil is not that great, but when you combine it with finasteride and topical, apparently it's remarkably effective at preventing hair loss. And the finasteride does not get into the body; it stays local in the scalp. So any possible side effects of finasteride don't exist. However, again, this is not sold in pharmacies. It has to be made up specially. You'd have to go to a doctor. For example, a dermatologist could probably have it made at one of those pharmacies that make the drugs up. I forgot what they're called. You know, when you walk in and with a prescription, they'll make up certain drug formulations that are not available commercially. But that's an option for you men who are really concerned. If you do have male pattern baldness, using this topical stuff, you won't have to worry about it. You'll never lose it. It won't restore. I'm not now. If you're really already bald, it's not going to bring the hair back. I'm going to warn you. But if you're just starting to go bald and use the topical finasteride, you're not going to go bald. As long as you use it, you will not go bald. And that's about it for this topic. If you want further information about nutrition, exercise science, supplement science, which supplements work, which ones don't, anti-aging research you can use today, fat loss techniques that really work, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, women's health and fitness, subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter. It's 40 to 50 pages every month. It's more like a monthly ebook. Extremely in-depth articles. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that if after 6 months of reading Applied Metabolics, you yourself will be an expert on nutrition. You'll know more than most nutrition professors and dietitians after just 6 months of reading them. That's how much in depth. And by the way, in case you're worried, it's not written in scientific jargon. I was a magazine writer for almost 40 years. I know how to write for the public. Every technical explanation is explained fully. You don't have to have a science degree to understand it, as is the case with some of the other digital newsletters, which they don't. I mean, these guys are just fresh out of school. They're still using all these academic and technical terms, which if you don't have the background to understand it, it's like they might as well be writing in Latin or Spanish or French. It just doesn't make sense. But that's because they're not writers. But anyway, the point being, if when you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise, and general medicine. There's also an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage where current subscribers only are welcome to send me short questions about anything they might have read in the newsletter or anything else that pops up in their head. As long as they're short questions that don't require lengthy answers, I will answer to only current subscribers. I don't accept unsolicited questions either on my website or under my videos. I'm giving free information. I think that's enough. That's my gift here. I forgot the legal. I was going to use a legal term. I can't remember what it's called, but I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, the point being that this information is enough. I don't have time to answer questions under the videos. However, anyone who wants to is welcome to stand in for me and answer the questions. But I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. I just don't have the time. So that's about it. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. They're the best. By the way, speaking of hair, if you give your dog an omega-3 fatty acid supplement, and they have it for dogs, your dog will get a much shinier and healthier looking coat, because I would say 95% of dogs are lacking in essential fatty acids. As a matter of fact, if you walk into any veterinarian office and you ask the people why they're there, About 8 out of 10 of them will talk about skin problems with the dog, such as eczema. And the funny thing is, all that is related to a long-term deficiency of omega-3 fatty acids and even omega-6 fatty acids, which causes the dog to have skin irritations. And the most of the commercial dog foods don't have enough of these fatty acids in there. They're just not. They have just minimal amounts of nutrients. So that's a little tip for you guys who have dogs. In the near future, I'll do a video on canine health and nutrition because some people have asked me for that. Anyway, take care and thank you for listening.